My name's Eric. I'm 37, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a decent grasp on what boundaries meant. I'm a project manager for a mid-sized construction company, and in my free time, I like to tinker in the garage, small carpentry stuff, building shelves, restoring old tools, that kind of thing. The garage has always been my space, my sanctuary. It's where I went after long, draining days when I needed peace and a bit of what does therapy. But that peace? It didn't vanish all at once. It was chipped away, slowly, subtly, until one morning I found myself staring at a padlock on my own garage door. And that's when everything changed. It all started innocently enough. My wife, Jess, had always been close with her family, her parents, Frank and Marlene, and her younger brother, Troy. They live about 20 minutes from us, in a cramped two-bedroom townhouse that's bursting at the seams. They're not bad people exactly, just messy, disorganized. The kind of folks who can't throw away a broken chair because someone might fix it someday, but that someone is never them. When they called one weekend and asked if we had a little extra space in our garage for some boxes, I didn't think much of it. At first, it really was just a few boxes. 2 cardboard containers labeled Christmas and books. I shoved them in a back corner, under my workbench, and figured they'd grab them once they needed their decorations or found time to sort them out. But then the visits started increasing. Every couple of weeks, Frank would swing by with just one more thing, usually dragging a reluctant Troy with him. Soon it wasn't just boxes, it was chairs, bags, some old gym equipment, and what looked like parts of a disassembled futon. My workbench became harder to access. My floor space shrank. I had to move things around constantly just to get to my drill press. I brought it up with Jess, casually at first. "Hey, your parents are kind of taking over the garage," I said one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. She waved it off with a tired smile. "They're just storing a few things, Eric. It's not forever. Be patient, okay?" I tried to be. I really did. But patience, it turns out, has a shelf life, especially when your garage starts to look like a second-hand furniture warehouse. A few more weeks passed, and I came home one night to find Frank and Marlene inside the garage, going through my drawers. Frank was holding one of my wrenches, squinting at it like he wasn't sure if it was his or mine. "Hey," I said, not harshly, but not soft either. "What are you guys looking for?" "Oh," Marlene chimed in. "We were just trying to find a screwdriver. Troy thought he left one here." "Why would Troy leave a screwdriver in my garage?" I asked, not entirely joking. Frank chuckled. "Well, we've all been using the space so much lately. It's kinda like a shared garage, right?" I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I just stared at them until they awkwardly shuffled out. That night, I told Jess point blank, "Your parents need to move their stuff. This isn't working. I can't even use my tools without tripping over their junk." She sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "It's not junk. And they don't have space, Eric. Come on, it's just the garage. Why are you so territorial about it?" That hit a nerve. I don't ask for much. I don't care if her mom rearranges our living room every Christmas, or if Troy drops by and eats all our cereal. But the garage, that was mine. My one little bubble. But instead of arguing, I let it go. For the moment. A few days later, I noticed something strange. One of my tool cabinets had been moved. Not slightly bumped, but completely relocated to make space for a giant plastic shelving unit filled with God knows what. I opened a few bins out of curiosity, extension cords, tangled holiday lights, a waffle maker, and, bizarrely, a shoebox full of old VHS tapes. It was chaos. I went inside and asked Jess if she knew what happened. She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, yeah," she said. "Mom came by earlier. She needed more space and thought it'd be better to organize everything on shelves. Isn't that more efficient?" Efficient. Right. For them, maybe. I was furious, but I held it in. Instead of blowing up, I started moving my tools into the basement, carving out whatever corner I could between the water heater and the washing machine. It wasn't ideal, but I was tired of fighting. At least, that's what I told myself. Until the padlock. It was a Saturday morning when I found it. I had just come back from a hardware store run, coffee in hand, eager to finally repair the busted hinge on our side gate. But when I walked up to the garage, my key didn't work. I frowned and tried again. That's when I noticed the shiny new padlock, thick, heavy-duty, with a fresh gleam like it had just been installed that morning. I stood there in disbelief, gripping the handle like maybe, just maybe, if I pulled hard enough, reality would bend in my favor. I stormed inside. Jess was in the kitchen, humming, and making a smoothie. Jess, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, why is there a padlock on the garage? She didn't turn around. Oh, that. Dad put it on. He said they didn't want anything disturbed since it's mostly their stuff now. I blinked. Their stuff? Their garage? She shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. You haven't really been using it much lately, Eric. You've got your tools downstairs now. They just needed a secure place for everything. You understand, right? No. No, I didn't understand. Not one bit. My heart was pounding in my chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and something deeper I couldn't even name yet. I walked to the hallway, opened the closet, and grabbed my toolbox. I didn't say a word. Not when Jess asked where I was going. Not when she muttered something about me being dramatic. I just walked outside, stared at that padlock one more time, and started unscrewing the hinges. I didn't break it. I didn't need to. I had enough tools to bypass a silly lock. Within minutes, I had the door open and stood in the garage, surrounded by everything that had slowly replaced me. Every shelf, every bin, every dusty old chair felt like a slap in the face. I took a long, steady breath. Then I made a decision. By noon, I had cleared a third of the garage. Carefully, methodically. I placed everything neatly on the curb, wrapped in plastic if it looked fragile, stacked where it wouldn't fall. I wasn't doing this in a rage. I was doing this like someone handling biohazard. Because that's what it felt like. Contaminated. Wrong. At 3:45 p.m., Jess came outside. Her eyes widened. Eric, what are you doing? I didn't stop packing. Reclaiming my garage, I said quietly. She walked over, her voice rising. You can't just throw their stuff out. I'm not throwing it out, I said calmly. It's on the curb. They can pick it up anytime. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're being unreasonable. I turned to face her fully. No, Jess. What's unreasonable is me being locked out of my own space because your family can't rent a storage unit like normal adults. Before she could reply, my phone buzzed. It was Frank. Then Marlene. Then Troy. I didn't answer. I just kept working. And by sunset, everything was out. Every last box, bin, and bag. And what I did next, well, let's just say it made Frank go absolutely pale when he arrived. Frank pulled up around 6:15 p.m. in his beat-up Ford Explorer, tires screeching slightly as he braked too hard in front of our driveway. Marlene sat in the passenger seat, already glaring at me like I'd set their house on fire instead of just putting some clutter on the curb. Jess was trailing behind them, her arms crossed, her face tense with that half-pained, half-disbelieving expression I'd grown far too familiar with over the last year. Frank stepped out like he was storming a battlefield. What is all this? He barked, waving toward the rows of plastic bins and garbage bags now lined along the curb like soldiers awaiting inspection. Why is our stuff out here? I didn't even pause from what I was doing, taping a final label to a box of tangled Christmas lights. Because it doesn't belong in my garage. He stared at me like I'd just spoken in another language. Our garage, he corrected. I turned and faced him, finally. No, Frank. My garage. I pay for this house. The mortgage. The property taxes. The maintenance. You've been squatting in my workspace for 6 months. You crossed a line. Marlene scoffed from behind him, arms flailing slightly as she stepped forward. Squatting? Oh, please, Eric. We asked permission. Yes, for 2 boxes, I shot back. 2 boxes. That somehow turned into 20 bins, a treadmill, an entire shelving unit, and a padlock on my door. You didn't ask for that. Frank's face started turning red, veins rising slightly on his temple. You're being petty. It was a storage favor. Families help each other out. And I did help, I replied. For months. But helping you doesn't mean handing over ownership. That's not family, that's exploitation. Jess was standing behind them now, silent, but I could feel her watching everything. She hadn't said a word since I started emptying the garage. Her expression wasn't furious, not exactly, but stunned, maybe even ashamed. She hadn't expected me to go through with it. Troy finally pulled up around 6:30 in his tiny Hyundai, slamming the door shut and walking over with that signature smug smirk. Wow, he muttered, shaking his head, you're really losing it, huh? I glanced at him, then pointed toward the sidewalk. The stuff's sorted by owner. Your bins are on the far end. You serious right now? He laughed, still smirking like this was some petty prank. You're kicking us out over a garage? You've got the whole house, man. Why do you care so much? Because I gave an inch and your family took the whole damn mile. You guys crossed every boundary I set. You made yourself at home in a place I never invited you into. Then you locked me out of my own space. That's not how this works. Frank took a step closer, posture rigid. We trusted you. We thought you were family, but you're acting like a stranger. I stepped up, face to face. No, Frank. You expected me to be passive, to just roll over and accept it. And when I didn't, you acted like I was the villain. Marlene looked like she was about to explode. We could have just talked about this. You mean like when you rearranged my garage without asking? I snapped. Or when you told my wife it was your space now. Or when you put a damn padlock on the door like I was some trespasser in my own home. That silenced her for a second. Frank finally broke the pause. You're going to regret this, Eric. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone who'd finally reached the end of a very long rope. No, I already regret letting it go on this long. And then I turned away. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning, I woke up early and walked out to the curb to find a few of the bins still sitting there. Most of the bigger items were gone, loaded up into Frank's car after the shouting match the night before. But 3 bins were left behind, and one was open, clearly rummaged through. I sighed. Of course, they hadn't picked everything up. At breakfast, Jess was quiet. She didn't touch her food, didn't look up from her plate. I waited for her to say something, anything, but the silence stretched for minutes. Finally, I broke it. So, are we going to talk about what happened yesterday? She swallowed, but still didn't meet my eyes. You embarrassed them. I felt something harden in my chest. I reclaimed my space. They embarrassed themselves. Her voice was soft. You didn't tell me you were going to do that. You didn't tell me they were putting a lock on my garage, I said flatly. She looked up finally, and the hurt in her eyes almost made me waver. I didn't know they would. I thought they'd stop eventually. I stood up and poured myself another coffee, needing something to do with my hands. They weren't going to stop, Jess. You know that now, don't you? She didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. Later that day, I moved all of my tools back into the garage. It felt strange at first, like returning to a room that had been occupied by strangers. But with each shelf I reorganized and each tool I put back in place, I felt something settle inside me. Not just relief, control. Like I had taken back something that had been quietly stolen from me piece by piece. But then, that evening, something unexpected happened. I got a knock at the door. Not the front door, the side door. The one that leads into the garage. When I opened it, Frank was standing there again. But this time, he wasn't shouting. He looked rattled, pale. His hands were shaking slightly as he held out a single piece of paper toward me. I took it and scanned it. It was a receipt for a storage unit. A very large one. Just wanted to let you know, he muttered. Eyes fixed on the floor. We won't need your garage anymore. Then, quietly, he added, you made your point. And walked away. But that wasn't the part that shook me. Because behind him, across the street, I saw Marlene. She was standing next to a truck, her face red, her hands on her hips. And she was watching Jess, who stood on our porch. And Jess was watching me. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. That night was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. The kind of quiet where the air feels too still, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Jess didn't say anything else after Frank left. She just stood there, arms folded across her chest, eyes distant. I didn't press her. I knew better by now. She was processing. Or maybe calculating. Either way, the silence between us spoke louder than any argument could have. I spent the rest of the evening in the garage, slowly reclaiming it inch by inch. I swept the floor twice, not because it needed it, but because the rhythm of it helped calm my thoughts. I set my toolboxes back on the shelves, reinstalled my pegboard, and even rehung the vintage Miller Lite sign I'd picked up years ago, the one Jess hated and had conveniently forgotten to rehang after the garage got taken over. As I worked, I realized just how much I'd let go of, not just the space, but my own voice. When I finally came inside, Jess was curled up on the couch, watching something on TV with the volume low. I sat on the opposite end. For several long minutes, we both pretended to be immersed in the show, but neither of us was really watching it. Eventually, she said, you could have told me what you were going to do. I didn't think you would have backed me up, I answered honestly. And I needed to know that I could still stand up for myself, even if it meant doing it alone. She flinched a little, but didn't deny it. After a pause, she asked, are you going to hold this against me forever? I shook my head. No, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen. That was the end of it for the night, anyway. The next morning, I found out what you made your point really meant. I went out to the curb to bring in the trash bin and noticed a folded note taped to the mailbox. No envelope, just my name in sloppy, all-caps handwriting. I knew it was Frank's the second I saw it. He writes like he's still using a chalkboard. The note read, "Hope you're happy. You've humiliated your own family over a garage. Your wife's upset. Your in-laws are hurt. And you've made enemies out of people who only ever tried to support you." Think about that. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. I crumpled it without reading it twice. But as I turned back toward the house, I noticed something else. The side fence gate was slightly ajar. Odd. I always lock it. I walked over and spotted faint footprints in the dirt. Someone had been in our backyard. That evening, I installed a camera facing the back gate. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew the way Frank operated. He wasn't the kind of guy who let things go quietly. He simmered. He brooded. He plotted. The man once held a grudge for 5 years over a poker game because someone accused him of looking at their cards. A couple of days passed without incident, though the atmosphere in the house was still cold. Jess was civil, but distant. She cooked meals, we exchanged small talk, but it all felt mechanical. Like we were both walking on a tightrope and afraid to tip either way. Then came Saturday. I was in the garage, working on refinishing a cabinet I'd found on Craigslist, when the door to the house swung open and Jess walked in, holding her phone. "They posted about you," she said flatly. "Who?" "My mom. On Facebook." I wiped my hands on a rag and raised an eyebrow. "What kind of post?" She handed me her phone. It was Marlene's profile. She'd shared a post with a smiling stock photo of a broken family, complete with sad eyes and dramatic lighting. The caption read, "When you do everything for someone, let them marry your daughter, let them into your life, and they repay you by throwing your belongings in the street and locking you out. Some people are only family by name, not by heart. Hashtag disrespect, hashtag ungrateful, hashtag family matters." The comments were worse. One of her friends wrote, "He sounds toxic. Your daughter deserves better." Another chimed in, "Sounds like you need to move in with her and get her out of that situation." And then one particularly nosy neighbor, Linda, who I already hated, had added, "I saw that stuff on the curb. I thought someone was evicted. Can't believe it was your son-in-law. Shameful." I handed the phone back. "So that's how they're spinning it." Jess didn't say anything. She just sat down on the edge of my workbench and rubbed her temples. "They're never going to stop, are they?" "Not unless you make them," I said gently. "I don't want to be in the middle of this, Eric." I nodded. "I know. But pretending you're not in the middle doesn't make it go away. Right now, they're attacking your husband online because they didn't get their way." Her shoulders slumped. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell them it's not okay. Tell them to take the post down. Tell them you're on my side." She hesitated. Then, quietly, "I don't want to pick sides." And that's when I realized she already had. She just didn't want to say it out loud. Later that evening, after she went to bed, I sat in the garage and stared at nothing for a long time. The air smelled like sawdust and varnish, familiar and grounding. I kept thinking about that note Frank left me, about how I'd humiliated them. It's funny how entitled people always feel victimized when you finally draw a line. The next day, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just a manila envelope on the welcome mat. Inside, something that made my stomach twist. Because now, they weren't just being petty. They were trying to escalate. And they just made a massive mistake. I picked up the envelope and felt a weight in my chest before I even opened it. It was thick, heavy, like it was trying to warn me. This changes everything. I brought it into the garage, sat at my workbench, and opened it with the same care I'd used to handle a splintered board about to snap. Inside were photocopies of receipts, photos printed from a phone, and a handwritten letter from Frank. The receipts were for tools. My tools. Photos showed my workbench, my drill press, my shelves, all labeled in sloppy black Sharpie with little notes like, "Ours, family property, contributed by Frank." The letter was worse. It read, "Eric, since you've decided to make things legal and draw lines, here's what you need to know. Many of the tools and items in that garage were paid for or co-purchased during visits over the past year. We have proof of contribution and are prepared to claim our share. If you do not return our items or compensate us for what's missing, we will be pursuing small claims court." This could have stayed civil. Frank. I stared at the page. The ink blurred slightly from how tight my jaw clenched. Frank was trying to claim ownership over my property. He was rewriting history to paint himself as the generous benefactor who'd outfitted my garage as if he'd ever paid a single cent. It was a desperate bluff. He didn't have a leg to stand on, and he knew it. But that didn't mean he wouldn't try to drag me through the mud. I called Jess into the garage. She took one look at the papers, and her face turned white. "You're kidding," she whispered. "I wish I was," I said, handing her the letter. "I don't even know what half of this is supposed to prove." She looked at me, then back at the photos. "That's your sander. I remember you ordering it on your birthday 2 years ago." "Exactly. And my dad gave me that leveler as a gift when I got my first job in construction. These aren't Frank's. He's trying to fabricate a narrative because I embarrassed him." She looked up at me slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to respond, but not the way he wants." That night, I called a lawyer friend of mine named Lewis. We'd worked together on a few site compliance issues before, and I trusted him. I sent over the photos, the receipts, the letter. He reviewed everything and called me back within 2 hours. "Yeah, this isn't going anywhere," he said. "But you need to make a paper trail. Respond once, clearly, and then no more contact. Make it airtight in case he actually tries to take this to court." So I drafted an email. Calm, professional, not emotional. "Frank, I received your letter and reviewed the documents enclosed. To be clear, all tools and items currently in my garage were either purchased by me or gifted to me, and I have supporting receipts or witness statements to that effect. Your claims are unfounded. If you proceed with legal action, I will counter for harassment, attempted fraud, and defamation. Any further contact should go through my legal counsel. Eric." I copied Lewis on the email. Then I hit send. The response came the next day. From Marlene. "You think you're so smart, hiding behind lawyers. We trusted you. We let you marry into our family. We treated you like a son. And this is how you repay us? You've turned Jess against us. You've poisoned her. You're ruining everything." And then, the final line, "If Jess leaves you over this, it'll be your own fault." I showed the message to Jess. She read it slowly, mouth tightening with each sentence. Then she handed the phone back and said, "Delete it." "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "No one talks to my husband like that. Not even my mother." It was the first time in weeks I saw fire in her eyes again. That night, Jess called her parents. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She spoke with the same cold, deliberate tone I'd used when I placed their things on the curb. "I saw the message, Mom. I saw the Facebook post too. You need to take it down. And you need to back off, permanently." I could only hear Jess's side of the call, but I could feel the storm on the other end. "No," she said. "You don't get to twist this into Eric being the villain. You locked him out of his own garage. You acted like it was yours. You used me to do it. You made him feel like a stranger in his own house. And now you're playing the victim." Her hand trembled slightly as she held the phone, but she never broke. "This isn't just about the garage anymore. This is about you. About how you manipulate people and expect us all to bend to your reality. Well, I'm done. You're not welcome in our home anymore. Not unless you apologize." Another pause. And then, "No. This time you don't get to decide when the conversation's over." She hung up. That night, for the first time in weeks, Jess came out to the garage and sat beside me while I worked. "You were right," she said quietly. "About all of it." I didn't say anything at first. I just handed her a small box of screws I was sorting, and we worked together in silence for a bit. "They've always been like that," she added after a while. "But I never saw how deep it went until now. They make you feel like you owe them for letting you exist in their world." "Yeah," I said. "That's exactly it. I don't want to live in their world anymore." The fallout came fast after that. The Facebook post vanished within 24 hours. I imagine it wasn't by choice. Jess had commented directly on it, tagging her mother and calling her out for lying. It got messy. Dozens of comments from mutual friends, some defending, others asking what really happened. But it was too late for damage control. Jess blocked her parents. Then, we changed the locks. Not just for the garage, for every door. I added cameras to the front and side entrances, and we even got a doorbell cam. I wasn't taking chances. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail, handwritten again, but this time from Troy. He didn't want to pick sides, he said. But he thought it was messed up that we'd cut off contact over some storage space. I didn't respond. Jess didn't either. We were done explaining ourselves. The garage is quiet now. Mine again. The tools are back where they belong. The floor's clean. The Miller Lite sign is crooked, but I like it that way. It reminds me that this is my space, not anyone else's. Sometimes I catch Jess in the doorway, watching me work. She smiles now. Real smiles. Not the tight, apologetic kind she used to give when her family caused drama. We're stronger. We've got boundaries. We learned the hard way that you can't let people stay in your life just because they share blood, not if they poison your peace, twist the truth, and treat you like a resource instead of a person. Family isn't who says they love you. It's who respects you. And in the end, reclaiming my garage wasn't just about a room. It was about reclaiming myself.